Maria Gonzalez woke up early that morning just like she did every day. She tied her apron around her waist, checked her supplies one last time, and rolled her hot dog stand out onto the busy street corner. It wasn't much, a small cart with a bright yellow umbrella, but it was hers. Every sausage she grilled, every bun she toasted was a step closer to her dream of owning a restaurant someday. The aroma of sizzling meat filled the air as people passed by. Some stopped for a quick bite before work, others lingered to chat. Maria loved talking to her customers. They weren't just strangers buying food. They were friends who came back because they appreciated her kindness and the care she put into everything she made. But not everyone saw Maria's stand as a source of joy. Officer Ryan Carter had been watching her for weeks now. He didn't. People like her setting up shop on what he considered his streets. To him, Maria represented everything he disliked, someone who didn't fit his idea of how things should be. He thought her presence was messy, disruptive, and unnecessary. That afternoon, Officer Carter decided to act. He parked his patrol car near the curb and stepped out, adjusting his belt as if preparing for battle. His boots clicked against the pavement as he approached Maria's stand. The sound made her look up from flipping a hot dog. "Ma'am," he said sharply, his voice cutting through the hum of conversation around them. Maria wiped her hands on her apron and smiled politely. "Good afternoon, officer. Can I help you?" "I need you to shut this down right now," he replied without hesitation. Maria blinked in confusion. "Why? Is there something wrong?" Officer Carter crossed his arms over his chest. "You don't have permission to be here." "That's not true," Maria said calmly. She reached under the counter and pulled out a folder containing all her permits. "I've got all the paperwork, see?" He barely glanced at the document she held out. Instead, he sneered. "This isn't your place. You shouldn't even be here." His words stung, but Maria refused to let him intimidate her. "This is my place," she said firmly. "I worked hard for this. I followed all the rules." For a moment, silence hung between them. Then Officer Carter's face twisted into a scowl. Without warning, he grabbed the edge of her sign, the one that read Maria's Famous Hot Dogs, and yanked it off its stand. It clattered to the ground with a loud bang. Gasps rippled through the crowd of onlookers. Maria froze, stunned. Before she could react, Officer Carter moved again. He kicked over her cart, sending condiments, napkins, and utensils scattering across the sidewalk. Bottles of ketchup and mustard shattered, staining the concrete red and yellow. "No!" Maria cried, rushing forward. But Officer Carter ignored her protests. He started loading pieces of her equipment into the trunk of his car, claiming it was evidence. Tears welled up in Maria's eyes as she watched her livelihood being dismantled. Her hands trembled as she tried to pick up what remained of her supplies. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Because I can," Officer Carter replied coldly. By now, a small crowd had gathered. Phones were out recording the scene. Someone shouted, "Leave her alone!" Another person yelled, "That's not fair." But Officer Carter didn't care. Once he finished confiscating her belongings, he slammed the trunk of his car shut and walked away without looking back. Maria stood there, surrounded by broken glass and spilled food, feeling utterly defeated. Her dreams felt like they were crumbling, along with her stand. She sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Passers-by offered comforting words, but nothing could ease the ache in her heart. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the empty street corner, Maria realized something important. She couldn't give up. This wasn't just about her. It was about standing up for what was right. If Officer Carter thought he could silence her, he was wrong. With renewed determination, Maria vowed to fight back. She didn't know exactly how yet, but she knew one thing for sure. Justice needed to be served. And she wouldn't rest until, it was little did she know, her decision would inspire an entire community and spark a movement that would change lives far beyond her own. The video of Officer Ryan Carter tearing down Maria Gonzalez's hot dog stand spread like wildfire. Within hours, it was everywhere. Social media platforms, news websites, and even late-night talk shows. The footage showed every detail. The key: officers' aggressive actions, Maria's tears, and the shocked reactions of bystanders. People couldn't stop talking about it. At first, many assumed it was just another case of injustice that would fade away with time. But this time was different. Something about Maria's quiet strength resonated deeply with viewers. She wasn't screaming or lashing out. She was simply trying to protect what she had built. And when Officer Carter tore her stand apart, it felt personal to anyone who had ever struggled to make ends meet or faced unfair treatment. Local residents were the first to take action. By the next morning, a group of neighbors gathered at the same street corner where Maria's stand used to be. They brought signs chanting slogans like, "Justice for Maria," and "No more abuse of power." Cars honked in support as they drove by, and pedestrians joined in, swelling the crowd. Among the protesters was Jamal Thompson, a young activist known for his work advocating for marginalized communities. He had seen the video the night before and immediately felt compelled to get involved. When he arrived at the protest, he introduced himself to Maria, offering his help. "Maria," Jamal said gently, "you shouldn't have to go through this alone. Let us stand with you." Maria hesitated at first. She didn't want to cause trouble or draw too much attention to herself. But Jamal reassured her. "This isn't just about you anymore," he explained. "What happened to you is wrong, and if we don't speak up now, it'll keep happening to others." With Jamal's encouragement, Maria agreed to let him guide her through the process of seeking justice. Together, they filed a formal complaint against Officer Carter with the police department. They also reached out to local lawyers, hoping to build a strong legal case, but the movement didn't stop there. Social media played a crucial role in amplifying Maria's story. Hashtags like "Justice for Maria" and "On Stand with Maria" began trending nationwide. Influencers, celebrities, and activists shared posts calling for accountability. Every share, retweet, and comment added fuel to the fire. Soon, national news outlets picked up the story. Reporters interviewed Maria, asking how she felt about what had happened. Though still shaken, she spoke with courage and clarity. "I'm not asking for anything special," she told one reporter. "I just want fairness. I followed all the rules, worked hard, and treated people kindly. Why should someone be allowed to destroy that?" Her words struck a chord with millions. Donations poured in from strangers across the country to help Maria rebuild her stand. Some sent money directly, while others organized fundraisers. In just days, the campaign raised tens of thousands of dollars, far more than Maria needed to replace her equipment. Meanwhile, pressure mounted on city officials to address the growing outrage. Protesters marched outside the police station, demanding answers. Letters and petitions flooded the mayor's office, urging swift action. Even some members of the city council publicly criticized Officer Carter's behavior, calling for an independent investigation. But not everyone supported Maria. There were those who defended Officer Carter, claiming he was simply doing his job. Online trolls attacked Maria, accusing her of exaggerating the situation or using it to gain sympathy. Some even suggested she deserved what happened because she was taking up space on public property. Despite these attacks, Maria refused to back down. She leaned on her growing network of supporters for strength. Jamal became her closest ally, helping her navigate both the legal system and the emotional toll of being thrust into the spotlight. One evening, after a long day of interviews and meetings, Maria sat with Jamal at a cafe near her neighborhood. She looked exhausted but determined. "I never wanted any of this," she admitted softly. "All I wanted was to sell hot dogs and make people happy." Jamal nodded. "I know, but sometimes life pushes us into roles we didn't choose. You're not just fighting for yourself anymore, Maria. You're fighting for everyone who's been treated unfairly." Maria thought about that for a moment. She realized he was right. This wasn't just about getting her stand back. It was about proving that ordinary people could hold powerful institutions accountable. As the weeks passed, the movement gained even more momentum. Schools held discussions about systemic injustice, inspired by Maria's story. Artists painted murals of her stand. turning them into symbols of resilience. Musicians wrote songs dedicated to her courage. Even businesses joined in. Local restaurants offered discounts to anyone wearing a Backyard Justice for Maria shirt. One entrepreneur donated a brand new food truck to Maria, complete with custom designs celebrating diversity and unity. Through it all, Maria remained humble. She thanked everyone who supported her, always emphasizing that this fight belonged to the community as much as it did to her. By the time the police department announced they would conduct an internal investigation into Officer Carter's actions, the world was watching. People knew this wasn't just another news cycle, it was a turning point. Whether justice would truly be served remained uncertain, but one thing was clear. Maria Gonzalez had sparked something powerful, and no matter what happened next, she, and the countless others standing beside her, wouldn't give up until real change occurred. The announcement of an internal investigation into Officer Ryan Carter's actions brought a mix of hope and skepticism. For Maria Gonzalez and her supporters, it was a small victory, a sign that their voices were being heard. But many doubted whether the police department would truly hold one of its own accountable. After all, such investigations often ended with little more than a slap on the wrist. Maria understood these concerns better than anyone. She had seen how systems designed to protect people could instead shield those in power. Still, she refused to let cynicism take over. With Jamal Thompson by her side, she pushed for transparency every step of the way. They demanded that the investigation include independent oversight, ensuring it wouldn't be swept under the rug. Their persistence paid off when the mayor announced the formation of a civilian review board to oversee the process. This decision came after days of intense protests outside City Hall, where thousands chanted slogans like "No justice, no peace," and held banners calling for accountability. The review board would consist of community leaders, legal experts, and ordinary citizens, people who represented the diversity of the city. As the investigation began, evidence started pouring in from multiple sources. Witnesses who had been present during the incident came forward, describing Officer Carter's aggressive behavior in vivid detail. Some recounted how he ignored Maria's permits and tore down her stand without provocation. Others spoke about the fear they felt watching him act with such unchecked authority. Security footage from nearby businesses also played a critical role. One camera captured the entire scene clearly. Officer Carter kicking over Maria's cart, confiscating her equipment and walking away without a second glance at the devastation he left behind. When this video was released to the public, outrage surged once again. It became impossible to deny what had happened. But perhaps the most damning revelations came from within the police department itself. Former colleagues of Officer Carter stepped forward, sharing stories of his discriminatory behavior over the years. One officer described how Carter frequently made derogatory comments about vendors from minority backgrounds, dismissing them as not belonging. Another recounted an incident where Carter used excessive force against a homeless man, simply because he refused to move from a sidewalk. Each testimony painted a troubling picture of a man who believed himself above reproach. His actions weren't isolated incidents, they were part of a pattern. And now, thanks to Maria's courage, that pattern was finally being exposed. For Maria, the investigation was both empowering and exhausting. Every new piece of evidence brought her closer to justice, but it also reopened old wounds. Reliving the trauma of that day wasn't easy, especially when critics tried to discredit her story. Online trolls continued their attacks, questioning her motives and accusing her of seeking fame or money. But Maria found strength in the growing movement around her. Supporters rallied behind her, organizing events to raise awareness and funds. Local artists created murals depicting her resilience, while musicians composed songs celebrating her fight for fairness. Even children wrote letters to Maria, telling her how brave she was and promising to stand up against injustice themselves someday. Jamal remained her steadfast ally throughout the process. He helped her prepare for interviews, guided her through legal proceedings, and shielded her from unnecessary stress whenever possible. Together, they strategized ways to keep the pressure on city officials, ensuring the investigation stayed on track. One particularly tense moment came when rumors spread that the police department might settle the case quietly, offering Maria financial compensation in exchange for dropping her complaint. While some advised her to accept the offer, Maria refused. "This isn't about money," she told Jamal firmly. "It's about making sure no one else has to go through what I did. If we settle now, nothing will change." Her resolve inspired others to dig deeper. Activists filed Freedom of Information Act requests to access internal records related to Officer Carter's past conduct. Journalists uncovered documents showing previous complaints against him, all of which had been dismissed or ignored. The weeks turned into months. The mounting evidence left little room for doubt. Officer Carter's guilt was undeniable. Yet even as the tide shifted in Maria's favor, questions lingered about the broader implications of the case. Would holding one officer accountable lead to meaningful reforms, or would it merely serve as a temporary distraction from deeper systemic issues? These thoughts weighed heavily on Maria's mind. Late one night, as she sat alone in her apartment reviewing notes for an upcoming hearing, she allowed herself to reflect. She thought about the countless others who had faced similar injustices but lacked the resources or support to fight back. "I can't stop here," she whispered to herself. "This has to mean something bigger." The next morning, refreshed and resolute, Maria met with Jamal to discuss their next steps. They agreed that winning the case was only the beginning. True justice required addressing the root causes of inequality and ensuring that institutions served everyone equally, not just those in positions of privilege. With renewed determination, Maria prepared to face whatever came next. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew she wasn't alone. Behind her stood a community united by a shared vision of fairness and accountability. And so, as the investigation neared its conclusion, anticipation grew. People across the city and beyond waited anxiously for the verdict. Would Officer Carter face consequences for his actions? Or would the system find yet another way to protect itself? Whatever the outcome, one thing was certain. Maria Gonzalez had already achieved something remarkable. By standing up for herself, she had ignited a movement that showed no signs of slowing down. Her courage reminded everyone that even the smallest acts of defiance could spark monumental change. Justice might still feel distant, but for the first time in a long while, it seemed within reach. The day of the verdict arrived and the city held its breath. The courtroom was packed with reporters, activists, and supporters eager to witness history unfold. Maria Gonzalez sat nervously in the front row, flanked by Jamal Thompson and her attorney. Her hands trembled as she clutched a tissue, unsure whether the outcome would bring vindication or disappointment. After months of hearings, testimonies, and evidence review, the civilian panel overseeing the investigation finally delivered their decision. Officer Ryan Carter stood stoically at the back of the room, his expression unreadable. When the presiding judge began reading the verdict, silence fell over the crowd like a heavy blanket. "Officer Ryan Carter has been found guilty of misconduct and abuse of power," the judge declared firmly. A collective gasp rippled through the room before erupting into applause. Tears streamed down Maria's face as she let out a shaky sigh of relief. For so long she had carried the weight of that terrible day on her shoulders. Now, finally, there was accountability. The punishment handed down wasn't as severe as some had hoped. Carter was stripped of his badge, fined heavily, and sentenced to several hundred hours of community service working with marginalized communities. While critics argued the penalties were too lenient, others saw it as a rare win against institutional injustice, a step toward dismantling the shield of impunity that often protected those in power. Outside the courthouse, cheers erupted as news of the verdict spread. Protesters who had gathered chanted, "Justice served," while cars honked in celebration. Social media lit up once again, with hashtags like accountability matters trending worldwide. People praised Maria for her courage, calling her a symbol of resilience and hope. But Maria knew this victory wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who had fought alongside her. That evening, she addressed a massive rally organized by Jamal and other activists. Standing on a makeshift stage surrounded by banners and cheering supporters, She spoke from the heart. "This isn't just about me," she said, her voice steady despite the emotions bubbling inside her. "This is about every person who has ever been treated unfairly because of where they come from, what they look like, or how much money they have. Together we showed that justice can happen when we stand united." Her words electrified the crowd. Cheers turned into chants, and chants into promises to keep pushing for change. Inspired by Maria's journey, lawmakers introduced new legislation aimed at protecting small businesses and holding law enforcement accountable. Dubbed the Maria Gonzalez Act, the bill included measures such as mandatory diversity training for officers, stricter consequences for harassment, and increased support for street vendors facing bureaucratic hurdles. Maria became an icon overnight. Invitations poured in from across the country, asking her to speak at rallies, conferences, and schools. Her story resonated deeply with people from all walks of life: immigrants striving for a better future, entrepreneurs battling red tape, and anyone who had ever felt powerless in the face of injustice. With the funds raised during her crowdfunding campaign, Maria reopened her hot dog stand. But this time, it was bigger and better than ever. She transformed it into a food truck featuring bold designs celebrating unity and equality. One side bore a mural of diverse faces holding hands, while the other displayed the words, "Justice starts here." Customers flocked to the truck not only for its delicious food but also for the message it represented. Word of mouth spread quickly, and soon Maria's business expanded. She launched a chain of food trucks, each carrying the same ethos of empowerment and inclusion. Alongside Jamal, she founded a non-profit organization called Stand Together, dedicated to helping marginalized entrepreneurs overcome obstacles. Through workshops, mentorship programs, and grants, Stand Together provided resources to individuals trying to build sustainable livelihoods despite systemic barriers. Meanwhile, Officer Carter's downfall served as a cautionary tale. Stripped of his authority, he struggled to find work and rebuild his reputation. Some sympathized with him, arguing that he was simply a product of a flawed system. Others viewed his punishment as a wake-up call, urging police departments nationwide to address issues of bias and misconduct within their ranks. For Maria, seeing Carter stripped of his badge brought a sense of closure, but it wasn't enough. She understood that true justice required more than punishing one individual. It meant creating lasting change. So, she continued using her platform to advocate for reform. One of her proudest moments came when the mayor signed the Maria Gonzalez Act into law. At the ceremony, surrounded by supporters and lawmakers, she reflected on how far she'd come since that fateful afternoon when her stand was torn apart. "I never imagined I'd be standing here today," she admitted, smiling through tears. "But I learned something important along the way. When you fight for what's right, even the smallest victories can lead to big changes." As the months passed, Maria's influence grew. She traveled extensively, sharing her story and inspiring others to stand up against injustice. From classrooms to corporate boardrooms, she reminded audiences that courage starts with ordinary people deciding to make a difference. Back home, her food trucks became gathering spots for the community, a place where people could enjoy good food and meaningful conversations. Each location featured a wall of hope, where customers wrote messages of encouragement and solidarity. These walls served as reminders that even in difficult times, kindness and unity could prevail. Through it all, Maria remained humble. She often said, "I'm just a woman who sells hot dogs, but if my story can inspire someone else to believe in themselves, then maybe there's hope for us all." Her journey taught her and countless others that fighting for justice wasn't easy. It demanded patience, resilience, and unwavering determination. But it also proved that when people came together, they could achieve extraordinary things. And, though Maria's battle had reached a turning point, she knew the fight for fairness was far from over. There were still countless stories like hers waiting to be told, countless voices yearning to be heard. But for now, Maria allowed herself to celebrate. She had faced adversity head-on and emerged stronger, not just for herself, but for everyone who believed in a better world. Justice had been served, and in doing so, It had sparked a movement that refused to fade. The road ahead might still be long, but Maria Gonzalez had shown the world that no obstacle was insurmountable when hearts were united and spirits unbroken. Years passed and Maria Gonzalez's name became synonymous with resilience and justice. What started as a small hot dog stand on a busy street corner had grown into something far greater, a symbol of hope, unity, and the power of collective action. Her journey inspired not only her community but also countless others across the globe who dreamed of a fairer world. Maria's food truck empire flourished. Each new location carried forward the same mission, to provide delicious meals while championing equality and empowerment. The vibrant murals painted on her trucks told stories of struggle and triumph, reminding customers that every bite they took supported a movement bigger than themselves. Lines stretched around blocks wherever her trucks parked, drawing people from all walks of life eager to be part of something meaningful. But Maria didn't stop at running a successful business. Through Stand Together, the nonprofit she co-founded with Jamal Thompson, she created programs designed to uplift marginalized communities. Workshops taught aspiring entrepreneurs how to navigate permits, secure funding, and market their businesses. Mentorship initiatives paired newcomers with seasoned professionals willing to share their expertise. Grants helped individuals overcome financial barriers, giving them the tools they needed to turn their dreams into reality. One success story came from Sophia Patel, a young immigrant who wanted to open a bakery but lacked the resources. After receiving guidance and funding from Stand Together, Sophia launched her shop, which quickly became a local favorite. She later joined the organization as a mentor herself, paying it forward by helping others achieve their goals. Stories like Sophia's were everywhere, testaments to the ripple effect of Maria's work. The impact of the Maria Gonzalez Act continued to grow as well. Cities across the country adopted similar legislation, implementing reforms aimed at protecting vulnerable populations and holding institutions accountable. Law enforcement agencies began prioritizing diversity training and transparency, slowly dismantling the culture of impunity that had long shielded misconduct. While progress was gradual, each step forward felt monumental. Maria often reflected on how far things had come since that painful day when Officer Ryan Carter tore down her stand. At times she still felt anger, not toward him personally, but toward the system that allowed such abuse to happen unchecked. Yet, more than anything, she felt gratitude. Gratitude for the strangers who recorded videos, shared posts, and donated funds. Gratitude for activists like Jamal, who stood beside her through every challenge. And gratitude for the countless supporters who believed in her cause and refused to let it fade away. Her personal growth mirrored the broader changes happening around her. Once hesitant to speak publicly, Maria now commanded stages with confidence and poise. She delivered keynote speeches at international conferences, sharing lessons learned from her fight for justice. Audiences listened intently as she emphasized the importance of standing up, even when victory seemed impossible. "You don't have to be fearless to make a difference," she often said. "You just have to be willing to act despite your fear." Every voice matters, no matter how small it may seem. In addition to advocating for systemic reform, Maria worked tirelessly to foster understanding between communities. She organized events where police officers and residents could engage in open dialogue, breaking down walls of mistrust built over decades. These conversations weren't always easy. Emotions ran high and disagreements surfaced, but they planted seeds of empathy and collaboration. One particularly memorable event brought together former adversaries under one roof. Officers, activists, and everyday citizens sat side by side sharing meals prepared by Maria's team. As laughter filled the room and stereotypes crumbled, it became clear that change wasn't just about policies. It was about people coming together to build bridges. Despite her achievements, Maria never lost sight of her roots. She returned frequently to the street corner where her journey began, setting up her original cart for special occasions. It served as a reminder of where she came from and how far she'd traveled. Children lined up eagerly for free hot dogs, unaware that the woman handing them out had once faced unimaginable hardship. To them, she was simply someone kind and generous, offering warmth and joy. As time went on, Maria's legacy extended beyond her lifetime. Schools named scholarships after her, encouraging students to pursue careers rooted in service and advocacy. Streets bore plaques commemorating her courage, ensuring future generations would remember her story. Documentaries and books chronicled her journey, inspiring readers and viewers to take action in their own lives. Even Officer Ryan Carter's fate served as a lesson. After completing his sentence, he struggled to reintegrate into society. Some pitied him, seeing him as a victim of circumstance rather than a villain. Others viewed him as proof that accountability mattered, regardless of rank or privilege. Eventually, he found work mentoring at-risk youth, using his experiences to warn them about the dangers of prejudice and unchecked authority. Though redemption came late, it underscored the idea that everyone deserved a chance to learn and grow. For Maria, this evolution reinforced her belief in second chances and the possibility of transformation. She knew that real change required compassion as much as it did accountability. By choosing forgiveness over bitterness, she demonstrated strength few could match. On the 10th anniversary of the incident that changed her life, Maria hosted a massive celebration in the heart of the city. Thousands attended, spilling onto streets adorned with banners celebrating unity and progress. Speakers included activists, politicians, and ordinary citizens whose lives had been touched by her efforts. Music played, laughter echoed, and tears flowed freely as people embraced the spirit of togetherness Maria had fought so hard to create. As fireworks lit up the night sky, Maria stood quietly at the edge of the crowd, watching with a mix of pride and awe. Beside her, Jamal placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did this," he said softly. She shook her head, smiling. "We did this. All of us." In that moment, surrounded by love and gratitude, Maria realized her true legacy wasn't fame or accolades, it was the countless lives she had touched. She had sparked a movement that refused to die, igniting flames of hope in places where despair once reigned. And though she knew challenges lay ahead, she faced them with unwavering optimism. Justice might still feel distant for many, but thanks to Maria Gonzalez, it no longer felt unattainable. Her journey reminded everyone that sometimes the smallest acts of defiance could lead to the biggest victories. Whether it was selling hot dogs on a street corner or standing firm against injustice, Maria proved that ordinary people could ignite extraordinary change. As the crowd cheered and fireworks painted the sky, Maria whispered a silent promise to herself to keep fighting, keep believing, and keep inspiring others until fairness reached every corner of the world. Because justice, she knew, wasn't just an outcome, it was a lifelong pursuit, and she was ready to see it through.